The voice, or a voice, crying in the wilderness. Of course, you would probably need to be biblically oriented or a student of the scriptures to understand what this means, but it is a voice crying in the wilderness, or some translations say in the desert. Crying out just means shouting aloud. And the voice is saying, "Make the way of the Lord straight," or the way of acceptably serving Him, or the way of pleasing your God if you believe in God. Make it straight. Remove the obstacles. It says, take down the mountains, straighten the road, remove the obstacles that are in your path, fill in the potholes, so to speak. Make the way of serving God not acceptable, but not easy, but understandable. Make it clear. So, this voice that's crying in the desert or in the wilderness, saying, "Make the way of the Lord straight," the voice would be explaining the way that is acceptable to serve God, but also removing the impediments. So if you were to take a road that is traveled by whatever vehicle, or even on foot, and you fill in all the potholes, and you remove the rocks or the hills that are in the way, and straighten out the curves, how much easier it is to travel on this road than on the one that had the previous condition. Rocks in the way, hills and mountains. That's okay if you're in some kind of 4x4 and love doing that type of stuff, which I do. But when it comes to understanding how to serve God in an acceptable way, you don't want that stuff. You don't want to be struggling to follow that path. You want that path to be clear and have the obstacles removed. So that's what the voice is here to do. The voice is here to remove the obstacles and make the travel on this road clear, understandable. Well, the road's not understandable, but to make the message understandable, to make the road easy to travel upon. So that would mean making clear what the message is in this book. This one. This one. All different translations derived from one book. And the different translations are great. People may say, "Oh, nobody knows what it really says because there's so many different translations." The different translations are what makes this book understandable. To read a book that's written by one person a certain way gives you an understanding of what the person was trying to convey. But to read that book that's written in 10 different ways is much better. Because to get to that original language, which I guess was Hebrew and the New Testament, Aramaic, I'm not exactly sure. But to have it written so many different ways can help you understand very clearly what the original message was. So thank God for the different translations. That's not a difficulty. That's not something that impedes your understanding. It's something that benefits your understanding. So the voice, as referred to in a couple of different places in that book, is one that makes the message clear, makes it understandable. The way that religions and churches translate that book is deplorable. That's not advantageous. They have men that sit in some office somewhere and interpret what different passages mean, and then teach it to another person, who teaches it to another person, who teaches it to another person. Pretty soon, what's actually meant is confusing. And it's mixed with a bunch of doctrine that some church or group tries to fit into their teaching or their traditions. And that's not the way the book is supposed to be used. It is a lot of writing, so lots of us are almost content to let somebody else do all the reading and then tell us what it means. But if you mix that meaning with a bunch of tradition and doctrine, then you really have a problem, because every different religion and group excuse me, has their different teaching and doctrine. So what I've done for you is deprogrammed what I had learned from the cult that I was in, the Jehovah's Witness cult, and that's a whole nother story. So I took the teaching that I had learned for my whole life and had to read one translation after another, after another, after another, to deprogram what they had taught me, because most of it was just clearly wrong. They call it the truth. The Jehovah's Witness Church calls it the truth. They actually, when they speak to one another and talking of some person they haven't seen for a while, they will say, is he still in the truth? Well, holy cow, it's just not the truth. And you will see that as time goes on. The Jehovah's Witness Church does not have the truth. There are some truths that they have, just like other religions have some truths, but generally they are wrong, and it is not easy, it is not difficult to prove that they are wrong. It is very simple, and I will prove it to you in, well, I could do the whole thing in a half an hour. Or 10 minutes, actually. But as time progresses here, I'll use a few different teachings that they have taught me over the years, and that after a careful examination of the Bible that they use, you'll see that their teachings, many of them, are so wrong that it's disgusting that they teach that as the pure milk of the Word, that they have their doctrines and their teachings and their practices as something that God commands. And boy, that was a big eye-opener when I read other translations and found that their teachings are just not true. So this voice that's calling in the wilderness or the desert, saying, somebody, make the way straight. Make it easy to understand. Remove the misinterpretations. How can I do that? What makes me special? I'm not special at all. But this voice took the time to study that book over and over and over. In fact, this voice read 18 of them. And listing them off, well, I could read them off because I wrote it down because I have a short memory. But, okay, I'll read you them. The New World Translation, that's the Jehovah's Witness one. And since this voice was taught to read that one only, that's what I read over the years. 7 times. 6 times as the very first one. Then the Amplified, the Revised Standard, the New International, the King James, the Living Bible, the Douay, the Knox, the American Standard, the New Jerusalem, the Moffat, and the Rotherham. In between there, this voice went back to the New World Translation just to read it and see how it compared with the other ones after this voice had read the other ones. And I was appalled by what I found. 200,000 to 300,000 more words than the average Bible. In the New World Translation, the Jehovah's Witness version of the Bible. And that does not clarify things like the Amplified, which adds extra words to give you an understanding of a particular passage. No, those 200,000 or 300,000 words are added to confuse you. Because they do. They take a simple statement and add a whole bunch of garbage into it so that you're completely confused by the end of the sentence. So the other one's much simpler, much easier to understand, is what this voice is trying to do for you. Make the message from God much easier to understand and much simpler. It is not complicated. In fact, one place in Matthew says, it is not for the wise and the intellectual. Not sure how the second part of the verse goes, because my memory is scant. But it's for the simple and the uneducated. You may have to read it a number of times, because my wife, she said it was like reading Chinese for the first couple times. However, after 5 or 6 or 7 times, she really caught on to what it meant. And myself as well. So what this voice is going to do for you is take out all the rocks from the road, if you would like to travel it. That is, have attitudes and actions and a conscience acceptable to God. He is a very reasonable personage, this God that I've learned about. Everything about him is reasonable. And that's what this voice will convey to you. The simplicity of serving God. And you will find no traditions, In the speech of this voice, you will find no crazy, wild, radical interpretations. All you will hear is a simplified version of these 1,200 pages. I'll put it down for you into about 5 pages. And I'll use the book, this translation or that translation. In fact, any translation that you would like, you can look into if I mention a verse. And you will understand it clearly because the message is simple. So, does the voice have to be some special person? Do you have to have special credentials? Obviously not, if it's not for the wise and intellectual and learned. If it's for simple folks like myself and possibly you. We will understand who Israel is. That's a very special word in the Bible. And it describes the people that are acceptable to God. Those who are applying what this book says. And this voice will let you know who Israel is. There's certain groups that say they are Israel. Israel as in the acceptable group that God has approved. There's 3 that I can think of that say they are Israel. Jehovah's Witnesses say they are Israel. The Israel that is approved by God. The nation of Israel in the Middle East, they say they are the Israel that is approved by God. And the United States, it's not written in banners all over the place. But their position and their confession or their assertion is that they are Israel, the one that is accepted by God and approved. And we will find out if any of those groups, religions, or nations are the Israel of God, the one accepted by Him. And once this voice has finished explaining in simple terms that issue, you will have no doubt whatsoever. I promise you that. You will have no doubt whatsoever who the Israel spoken of in the Bible and acceptable to God is. In the next episode, I will begin to explain who the acceptable Israel is and leave you no doubt. Therefore, until next time, thank you for listening. I will be back. A voice calling out from the desert, saying, "Make the way of the Lord straight." Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.